Okay. I just want to tell you about a person from history, if that's what we're doing this week, Women's History Month. When I was a young girl, I received a book about outstanding women in history from my church. And that experience is memorable because it was at a time when we were taught that girls could not expect to achieve much of anything and that women's roles are limited. And I'm not sure how much we've changed. We need to know women's stories to give us confidence and courage to meet today's challenges. And that's why I want to tell you about Frances Perkins. My dad's 90, he remembers Frances Perkins, but most of us have never heard of her. Frances Perkins was born in 1880. She was educated, earning a degree in chemistry and physics and a master's in social science. She was one of those suffragists making speeches on the street corners in the early 1900s. She was independent. She sued to keep her maiden name when she was married in 1913. She collaborated with unsavory characters in business, organized labor, and government. She was guided and sustained by her religion until her death in 1965. While working on her master's thesis on poverty and child nutrition, Frances Perkins observed the misery of children working in a cannery. A few years later, she witnessed the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire when more than 100 women workers died, many leaping to their death from the burning three-story clothing factory because they were locked in. She dedicated her life to correcting inhumanity in the workplace. Frances Perkins worked under New York governors Al Smith and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She led legislators on inspections as part of her job of the state's factories and work sites to view firsthand the dangers of unfettered industrialism, or what some might call today free market capitalism. New York's workplace laws became a model for other states and later the nation, and she is responsible for that. In 1933, President FDR appointed Frances Perkins Labor Secretary, the first woman cabinet member. She served in that position until 1945 and remains the longest serving cabinet member ever of either gender. But before she accepted, she obtained his promise to support her goals. The New Deal was really her deal. During her tenure, in addition to poverty-busting public works jobs programs, she spearheaded adoption of permanent federal minimum workplace standards, including Social Security for aged and disabled, child labor restrictions, pensions, minimum wage, 5 8-hour days in a work week, overtime pay for over 40, workplace safety rules, injured workers' compensation, collective bargaining, which previously had been illegal, unemployment compensation when you get laid off. Sound familiar? Those standards were a dream 100 years ago. They came through a long and often bloody struggle and were enacted during the profound misery of the Great Depression. We shouldn't take those workplace standards for granted now. Many women before Frances Perkins have strived for basic human rights for working people. One was Mother Joan, an Irish immigrant who organized miners, mill workers, and children. And in this decade, Ai Jinpu, a daughter of Chinese immigrants, organizes for minimum wage, overtime pay, and other workplace improvements for domestic workers. Frances Perkins said, "The door might not be open to a woman again for a long, long time. And I had a kind of duty to other women to walk in and sit down on the chair that was offered, and so establish the right of others long hence in far distant geography to sit in the high seats." There was not another female U.S. Secretary of Labor until 1988, over 40 years later. That was under Ronald Reagan. Frances Perkins' philosophy was that a government should aim to give all the people under its jurisdiction the best possible life. We have not yet arrived. For instance, laws have been passed to limit some of the standards adopted in the 30s and 40s to make them nearly ineffective. The minimum wage fails to keep pace with inflation. Low-level managers often work long hours without overtime pay. Government employees are not covered by OSHA. Pensions are vulnerable to misuse. Due process is not required for termination of employment. Bullying in the workplace is legal. It is legal for businesses with fewer than 15 employees to discriminate. Doctors in training, read in the paper this morning, can be forced to work 24-hour shifts. It's crazy. The one of her goals she did not accomplish while Labor Secretary was universal health care. A right in most developed countries in the world today that we still don't have in the U.S. yet. I'm convinced that we all have a duty in whatever way we are able to carry forward the vision of Frances Perkins.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.